History celebrates crowns, empires, and golden ages, but power does not automatically create greatness. Sometimes it creates monsters. This video is not about military genius. It's not about empire building. It's about rulers who became symbols of moral decay, cruelty, instability, or corruption. 5 kings whose reputations survived not because of glory, but because of how deeply disturbing their reigns were. They are a Roman emperor who declared himself a god and turned executions into entertainment, or a French king whose court drowned in pleasure while the nation starved. Let's discover in this video. These are not myths, these are documented rulers, and their stories show what happens when absolute authority meets instability, ego, or moral collapse. Let's begin with the emperor who turned Rome into a theater of humiliation. Caligula ruled the Roman Empire from 37 to 41 AD. He inherited enormous power at a young age after the death of Tiberius. Initially welcomed as a fresh start for Rome, his reign quickly shifted from optimism to fear. Ancient sources describe a dramatic change in behavior after a serious illness early in his rule. Whether caused by psychological instability, trauma, or political pressure, his leadership became erratic, theatrical, and increasingly cruel. He redefined what unchecked authority could look like. Caligula openly declared himself divine. He demanded worship. Temples were constructed in his honor. He replaced statues of gods with his own likeness. This was not simply arrogance. It destabilized Roman religious tradition and political order. He humiliated senators publicly, stripping the Roman elite of dignity. One infamous story, likely exaggerated but symbolically powerful, claimed he planned to appoint his horse, Incitatus, as consul. Even if satirical, it demonstrated contempt for Rome's governing class. Financial recklessness followed. He drained the imperial treasury on massive spectacles, games, and construction projects. When funds ran low, he imposed heavy taxes and allegedly confiscated property from wealthy citizens. Ancient historians describe executions ordered casually. Political rivals were eliminated. Wealthy Romans were pressured to name him heir in their wills. Executions reportedly became theatrical. Some accounts suggest he preferred prolonged suffering. Whether fully accurate or not, the consistency of hostile ancient sources shows that fear defined his reputation. He ruled only 4 years. In 41 AD, members of the Praetorian Guard assassinated him. His reign is remembered less for policy and more as a case study in psychological volatility, amplified by absolute power. Henry VIII ruled England from 1509 to 1547. He began his reign as a charismatic, educated Renaissance prince. Athletic, intelligent, politically ambitious, he projected strength and confidence. But over time, his rule became associated with volatility, executions, and religious rupture. His personal life would reshape an entire nation. Henry married 6 times. 2 of his wives, Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, were executed on charges of adultery and treason. Whether fully justified or politically constructed, the message was clear. Proximity to the king did not guarantee safety. When the Pope refused to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, Henry broke with Rome. He declared himself supreme head of the Church of England. This was not a symbolic shift. It triggered massive structural change. The dissolution of the monasteries followed. Church lands were seized, monastic institutions were dismantled. Wealth was redistributed. Resistance was suppressed, sometimes violently, including the execution of those involved in the Pilgrimage of Grace rebellion. Political opponents were eliminated through charges of treason. Even former allies such as Thomas More were executed. Henry's later years were marked by declining health, paranoia, and increasing severity. Laws expanded definitions of treason. Criticism could become fatal. Unlike Caligula, Henry was not chaotic. He was calculated, but he reshaped religion, law, and governance around personal objectives. Thousands were executed during his reign for religious and political reasons. His legacy is complex. architect of the English Reformation, father of Elizabeth I, but the brutality and personal motivations behind many of his decisions cemented his reputation as one of England's most feared monarchs. He did not lose control, he used it fully. Charles VI ruled France from 1380 to 1422. He inherited the throne at just 11 years old. Early in his reign, he was known as Charles the Well-Beloved. That reputation would collapse. Charles VI suffered from severe episodes of mental illness beginning in his 20s. Historians debate the cause: schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, genetic instability, but the consequences were undeniable. France was ruled by a king who periodically could not recognize his own family. One of his earliest public breakdowns occurred in 1392 when he attacked members of his own escort during a military expedition, killing several men before being restrained. This marked the beginning of recurring psychological crises. During episodes, Charles reportedly believed he was made of glass and could shatter if touched. He sometimes refused to bathe or change clothes for extended periods. At times, he didn't recognize his wife or children. He denied his own identity. Government stalled. Power shifted to rival factions, particularly the Burgundians and the Armagnacs, who fought for control during the king's incapacitated periods. Internal civil conflict weakened France dramatically. Meanwhile, the Hundred Years' War with England intensified. Under King Henry V of England, French forces suffered catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. France was fractured, divided, and leaderless. In 1420, under immense pressure, Charles VI signed the Treaty of Troyes. This treaty disinherited his own son and recognized Henry V of England as heir to the French throne. For many French citizens, this was political collapse at the highest level. While Charles VI was not morally depraved in the same way as others on this list, his inability to govern had devastating consequences. A kingdom at war requires stability. France had delusion, factionalism, and paralysis. By the time of his death in 1422, France was effectively split between English control and internal rivalry. His reign stands that weakness at the top can be as destructive as cruelty. Louis XV ruled France for nearly 59 years, 1715 to 1774. He inherited one of the most powerful kingdoms in Europe. Early in his reign, he was called Louis the Beloved. By the end of his life, that nickname had become bitter irony. His rule coincided with mounting financial strain, colonial losses, and growing public resentment. Louis XV became associated with excess and detachment. Versailles transformed into a symbol of indulgence. Lavish parties, luxury, elaborate court rituals, and a visible culture of favoritism dominated royal life. His relationship with powerful mistresses, particularly Madame de Pompadour, became politically significant. Royal intimacy blurred into political influence. Meanwhile, France struggled economically. The 7 Years' War resulted in major territorial losses, including much of France's North American empire. War debts grew. Tax systems remained deeply unequal, with the burden falling heavily on common citizens. Criticism grew that the king prioritized pleasure and court politics over reform. Corruption scandals and perceptions of moral decline weakened royal authority. Although Louis XV was not uniquely brutal compared to some rulers on this list, his detachment and indulgence contributed to long-term instability. By the time of his death, public respect for the monarchy had eroded severely, setting the stage for the crisis that would explode under his successor. He did not cause the French Revolution directly, but he weakened the foundation that once made it unthinkable. King John ruled England from 1199 to 1216. He was the youngest son of Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine. Unlike his brother Richard the Lionheart, John did not inherit a legacy of military glory. Instead, he inherited political fragility and territorial conflict. He came to power during a time of tension between the English crown and French monarchy. His reign would be defined not by strength, but by loss, resentment, and mistrust. Unlike rulers remembered for spectacle or madness, John's notoriety was built on systematic political failure and aggressive exploitation of power. John's rule was marked by military incompetence. He lost vast French territories, including Normandy, lands that English kings had controlled for generations. This was not merely symbolic. It damaged England's prestige and economic position in Europe. To fund failed military campaigns aimed at reclaiming these lands, John imposed heavy taxation. Feudal payments increased. Scutage, a payment made in lieu of military service, was demanded aggressively and repeatedly. Barons were squeezed financially beyond traditional expectations. But taxation alone does not create lasting hatred.
It was the way John used power. He weaponized the legal system. He imposed massive fines on nobles who displeased him. Lands were seized. Inheritance rights were manipulated. Hostages, including children of powerful families, were taken as political leverage. John also clashed with the Church. A dispute with Pope Innocent III over the appointment of the Archbishop of Canterbury led to England being placed under interdict in 1208. Religious services were suspended across the kingdom. The king responded by confiscating church property. Eventually, John submitted to the Pope, even declaring England a papal fiefdom to secure support. For many nobles, this was national humiliation. Distrust deepened. Rebellion followed.
In 1215, English barons revolted. They captured London and forced John into negotiations at Runnymede. The result? Magna Carta. The Magna Carta was not a democratic revolution. It was a political contract limiting royal authority. It forced the king to accept that his power had legal boundaries. For a medieval monarch, this was extraordinary. John later attempted to annul the charter and resumed conflict, plunging England into civil war. His reign ended amid rebellion and invasion threats. He died in 1216, leaving behind instability and a damaged monarchy. Unlike theatrical tyrants, John's legacy is institutional. He is remembered as the king who pushed his own nobility so far that they formalized limits on royal power. He did not fall because of madness. He fell because no one trusted him.